Recording in progress.
Okay, so good evening, everyone. Once again, welcome to another class. So on Tuesday, we looked into classes and inheritance in Kotlin, where we actually wrote some very interesting codes. So I told us we're going to be building an application today. So yes, that is basically what we're going to be doing. We're going to be building an application of which we will apply the knowledge of classes and inheritance into the application. So I want to believe you can see my Android Studio. So I've actually just created a project already, tip, and that's going to be the name. So I'll just give us, so basically, let me just drop a picture of basically what we're going to be building. This is it. We're actually going to be building this application. Okay, so it's just going to calculate tip. What's a tip? The amount of money you give to someone for probably giving a good service. When you go to a restaurant and maybe you loved the service, you just give the waiter, a little money. That's basically what tip is all about. So now we're going to build an application to calculate a tip. So where we'll get the cost of the service, and then probably the cost of fried rice and chicken is 1.5. Okay, so maybe they served it so well, so you now say, okay, fine, because they served it so well, I want to give them amazing, so 20% of the price of that fried rice and chicken will be the tip. So, or you can decide you want 18%, that's good, or 15%, that's okay, and then you can calculate that. And then you will also be looking at rounding up numbers, okay, in how we can actually round up numbers in Kotlin. Also, we'll be looking at that too. Okay, so that's basically what we are going to be working on today. So I believe we're all ready. So let's just dive right into it. So first things first, we're going to be designing the application. We're going to be designing the application, and then one of the things we were always using, we were always making use of this layout editor, okay, where we'll do a lot of drag and drop and everything. But today we are going to learn to read and understand XML. Okay, what is XML? Extensible Markup Language. So we're not going to be doing drag and drop, dragging this. No, we're not going to be doing that today. Today we're going to actually split our design, and then we'll get to write this code ourselves. Okay. We'll get to write this code ourselves. So, so I don't know, I'm thinking, because we have someone new here, whether we should actually, okay, I think I renamed this. Well, okay, so let's just do this from the top for the sake of people who are just for the first time. So I'll just go to new project, okay, and then let's just, an empty activity. Okay, so I'm going to name, let's just call this tips. Okay, and then just going to finish that. Okay, so I think I don't think I'm going to need this guy anymore. Let's use this one. Okay, so just hold on, the graduate is going to build, and then we can move on. Okay, so like I said, we're going to be using XML. Okay, so what is XML? Like I said, extensible markup language. That's basically what XML is. Okay, so we're going to be modifying the XML, because the XML actually describes your UI. Okay, it's a way of just describing data using a text-based document. Okay, because of course XML is text-based. So we want to describe our UI, but we're going to be using a text-based document. If you check most of your check your files, like your values, the start files in your values folder, you see strings.xml. Those are XML files. Okay, so they are just text-based. So that's basically what we're going to do. We're going to describe even the view hierarchy. Okay, on the screen, everything you see. For example, your constraint layout. Okay, we're going to do all those designs with the XML. So okay, my Gradle is still loading, so just going to give it a bit of time. Yeah, okay, so to import everything that needs to be imported. I just had to do this for the sake of those who probably haven't actually gone through any of the classes and they stumble upon this video. Okay, so let's move ahead and then we'll just, once that is done, we'll get to continue. So for some of us, okay, like I said, we've used the design mode and it's kind of it's easy, okay, but I kind of prefer using this XML because I kind of I like to write out what I really want. So let's just kickstart. I think this is taking a bit longer, so let's use this other one and just start then. Okay, so this is basically what I'm talking about. This is what we call an XML Word file. You have activity underscore main.xml. Okay, this tells you that this is an XML file. And what is the XML? We said extensible markup language. Okay, it's just a way of describing data using text-based documents. So let me switch to design mode so we get to see this. So even we're going to even describe the view hierarchy. Like for example, your constraint layout, which is the parent. Okay, it can contain text views, it can contain buttons. Here it contains only a text view, okay, or other views as children because it's the parents. We talked about classes and inheritance on Tuesday. So, but remember, constraint layout is a subclass of view group. Okay, so it just allows you to position, or your views, okay, the child views in a flexible manner. That's basically that. So let's just go ahead and do a lot of things. So let me explain stuff on this now. So for example, we have this, okay? Now you have this view. Remember I said constraint layout is the parent. This is a child view. That's why even with the indentation, you can also see it. This is where this starts from. And then you see the text view based on indentation. It is within the constraint layout, okay? So which is the first thing, like I said, you should just notice the indentation, okay? Android Studio actually does this automatically, okay? It does this to actually show you the hierarchy of elements, okay? So if you notice the text view is indented because it is within the constraint layout. So that means the constraint layout is the parent and the text view is the child. Now, the attributes also are indented to show that they are part of the elements. These are the attributes of the text view. They are also indented to show you that they are part of this text view element, okay? Another thing to notice is the color coding. Okay, you see some things are, well, depends on some are yellow, some are green. You understand, you have a lot of colors, okay? So this is just, this is Android Studio helping you to know, okay, fine, what certain things are based on their colors, okay? Now, if you notice, it's the start and end tags of the elements are the same color. This is the start tag, this less than sign, okay? And the end tag, they are of the same color. So the colors actually, well, some of it may not match what you have, okay, in your own Android Studio, depending on the version you're using, but basically the essence of it is to know what is what. It helps you differentiate what certain stuff are. So let's now look at XML tags, elements, and attributes. Okay, so this is not really a web class, but this is very important. Okay, so let me just with this where you have your hello world. Okay, sorry about that. Just this that I'm going to highlight now. Okay, let's use that. Okay, so it's first of all, it is contained. The first line, which is line 9, starts with this. So this shows that this is the beginning of the text view. So this is the beginning of the tag, and then it ends with, so it starts with a less than sign and then ends with a /, yeah, and a greater than sign. So this shows the end of this tag. And within the tag, okay, you have the hello world, which is this. So let's use this. So this is an attribute of the text view. Okay, this is an attribute of the text view. Now, if I just, just to hover on this, okay, so you get to see this is the attribute, while this is the value. Okay, so remember this equality sign is more of an assignment statement. It's not an equality, it's an assignment. It's telling you, okay, fine, this is what we want to store here. So this is the attribute, the text attribute, and this is the value. This is the layout height, and this is the value. this is the layout width, and this is the value. So that is just a quick rundown of the whole tag elements and attributes. Okay, so this is the tag, these are the elements. Okay, this is the element, these are the attributes. Okay, so what basically this does is that it represents the text that will be displayed. This particular attribute represents the text that will be displayed by the text view. Okay, so that is just, I'm going to really try to rush this because we already have a lot to cover today. Okay, so so I'm going to just do a lot of a skip, but let me just touch this. Now you can actually see this particular tag, which is this constraint layout. It has these three properties that these other guys don't have, which is this XML, Android app, and then tools. So the XML, okay, it stands for XML namespace. Okay, and then each line actually just defines what we call a schema. A schema, or basically you can just say it's just like a vocabulary for what attributes that are related to, you know, those words. Okay, the Android, okay, is the particular what namespace. Okay, now like for example, so it marks attributes that are defined by the Android what system. So when you actually have this, you can have the attributes that are defined by the Android what system. So all of the attributes in our layout XML begins with one of these namespaces. Now, if I'm to take out this, let me just see. Let's do a test run. If I'm to take out this, you see there's a lot of errors because these attributes, or they actually belong somewhere. So because you have taken out that namespace declaration, you can see namespace Android is not what bound. So we need to create that namespace what declaration. So that is basically that. Okay, so it's just to try to touch certain things before we would continue. So let's actually now go into building this particular what application that we want to delete. Okay, so let's find out if this young man is done. With which, yeah, he is. So good. This is the project we want to make use of. So I'm going to close this main activity. We don't need it now. And then I'll switch to this one. So based on the design we have, okay, based on the design we have, we do not want to, you know, open, like we don't want to create, we don't need a text view actually. So let me just show you what are the things we can actually pick out from here. Okay, so first things we have this cost of service, and this is a view that will enable the user to type in something. Okay, so I think at this point, let me just ask, so what do you think this is? Who can just you know, say something? What do you think this is? So I mean, I can have your hands up. Okay, hello, are you with us?
No, my hands have been up long time. I forgot to put them down.
Okay, so Emmanuel Kichku, you want to answer that? Okay.
Okay, they are radio buttons.
Okay, yeah, exactly. They're called radio buttons. So we have, so if we look at this, we have what we call an editable text. It's called an edit text because you can actually type into it. You have an editable text. This is just a normal text view. Okay, this is just a text view. These are radio buttons, like he rightly said. This is a text view. Now, what about this? Does anybody have an idea what this view is, what this is? Yes, Emmanuel, go ahead.
Not too sure. Is it switch? Yeah.
Yes, it's a switch. Yes. Okay. Yes, you're correct. So then we have this. So this is actually a button, and then we have another text view. So we have an editable text, text view, radio buttons, text view, switch, button, and a text view. So that is what we're going to implement now. So we'll start with the first one. Let me take this out of the way. Okay, so I'm going to take out this text view. We don't need it. So the first thing we need is what? An editable text. So remember, when you want an element, you start with the tag, and a tag starts with the less than symbol. So I'm going to bring my less than, okay, and then you get to see a lot of what elements here, a lot of elements you can call. Okay, but what we want is what we call an edit text, an editable word text. Okay, so I'm just going to click enter, and then I'm going to have to now define the layout width. What will be the width of this text? Do I want it to match the parent? Do I want it to wrap the content? Okay, so match parent means, of course, the parents, the width is going to be as wide, and it's going to be touching the constraint layout because that is our parent. Okay, wrap content means it will just wrap whatever the input is going to be. So I'm going to use a wrap content match parent rather. Let's use a match parent for the width. And then the height, of course, we don't want the height to match. If we say the height should match parent, you see how long it's going to be. So I'm going to say wrap content. Okay, so that's that. Now, remember to close a tag, you need the less than sign and then the greater, the forward slash. Now, but you saw something. Now, this is actually leaving it like this means that you want to actually, you can actually do it like this, okay? But this is basically actually just advice. It's best to just close it out. We don't need to. This is way more neater. Besides, you don't have the edit text is not really going to have any other sub class within it. So it's best to close it out this way. Okay. Another thing I'm just going to add is what is the input type? This is an editable text. Now, for some of us, when you're probably if you have a bank app or whatever, you have a calculator, when you want to type in something, there are sometimes your keypad just displays only numbers. Sometimes it displays your normal keypad where you have letters and the rest. Okay, so here we can define what the input type should be. So I'm just going to say input. Just type in, you see it, and then you click on enter. So you can see there are a lot of options: date, time, number, and the rest. But we want, let's just say we want a text, and then you just go with the text for now. Okay, and note, we will have to give this an ID because we're definitely going to make use of it. So I'm going to just say, let me just call it cost. Let's just give it that cost. I think that's fine. Okay, but of course we still have we still have a red. Okay, and what is this red? It's telling us, what's it basically saying? When you just go over on this, it tells you the view is not constrained. So we need to add some constraints. Okay, so we don't need to do drag and drop. Okay, we can just do that ourselves. So first of all, I want to constrain this young man. I can actually just come here and click on this and drag. So there's what we call left, right. Okay, so this is the left of this view, this is the right of this view. At the same time, it's also called the start of this, and this side is called the end. So I want to constrain the start of the edit text to the start of the parent. That is left of the edit text to the left of the parent. So just gonna just start. When I just type start, yes, I just see, okay, you can see layout constraint start to start off, and then I'll choose parent. Our parent here is the constraint layout. Okay, so I will do the same thing for the top. Let's give it a top constraint. So top to the top of parent. And that kind of that solves that. So we do not have any red on this. I think we can actually just ignore this, yes, because it's not really a red. Okay, so this is actually XML, and this is, to me, this is far more interesting than drag and drop. Okay, so now let's still do, let's see what else we can actually do. But we do not want to, we want people to be able to impute numbers. Okay, for example, the cost of something, I want to, pardon me for not using Naira, because we have more of integers actually, 50 Naira and the rest. We no longer use Kobo. So it's easy to implement just integer numbers. So I want us to use any other currency like dollars, where you have to do, use decimals. Okay, you have cents and the rest. So I want to change my input type to be number decimal. so that I can have probably $2.50, $1.50. It kind of gives me that room. Naira, I don't, except somebody in the part of the country still using Kobo, and I have no knowledge of that. Another thing we can add to our edit text is what we call a hint. So this hint actually helps your user to know what is meant to be imputed in that field. Okay, so for this, I'm just going to say cost of service. Yes, cost of service. And of course, you can see this, it takes a text, so we need to extract the string resource. So I'm just going to do that. I have cost underscore of, so this is fine. Just click OK, and that goes out. Of course, this is talking about autofill hints. We'll talk about that much later. So let's move on. So let's see how this looks. Let's actually see how this looks. So I think I'm going to run this. Let me make use of this other emulator, and then let's see how it actually looks on our phone. Let's see how it looks on our phone. So, but notice that these guys are this edit text is kind of just glued to the parents. Okay, there's no margin, there's no space. So that's one of the things we can actually do. Let's give it a bit of room from the parents. It kind of looks clustered a bit. So we're going to do that. Probably we'll just add maybe let's say let's just say margin, it top the margin. So I'm just I can actually just do both. So but for now, let's just say a top margin of and then I can just say it, let's say 15 dp. Okay, that kind of brings it down a little. Okay, yeah, that's actually fine. That's fine. So let's see, what else can we do? Okay, so let's change this text. I've not given a text like what should actually be displayed. What we actually gave was a hint. So let's add the text variable property, and then let me say how, based on how that design was, how was the service? Okay. Yeah, how was the service? So I'm going to extract that. Okay, yeah, so that does it. That does it. Okay, so what else can we actually do? What else can we do? I think that's, now, I kind of don't like the fact that it's, so it's, if you notice, of course, we have two things. It's like two things are they are just on each other. You have the text and we have the hint. Okay, so the reason is because I actually ran the application when I used hint. Okay, but now I'm actually making adjustments. So we're using text and hint at the same time. So I think the emulator, okay, yes. So this is the result of the very first time we ran the app before we made changes to the text, to the margins and the rest. So let's now apply the changes that we made, and let's see the result of that change. Okay, so I'll also have to be looking at, of course, we need to be looking at the design to make sure we are on track. So let me bring this guy out here. So, okay, so we can see that we don't need this guy to actually extend to the parents. So we just need to make it a bit short. Okay, and then we need more space at the top. And of course, we also need space to the left of this. So I think that's something we need to add. Okay, so I'm going to just restart this. Okay, to make changes to. So for some of us who can't use emulator, just make use of your phone. Don't be held down by emulator if it's working or it's not working. So let's make those changes. And so to make those changes, I'm going to make the width, let's just say 150 dp. Okay, that makes it, that's fine. Or okay, let's just make it 160. And then so instead of me just saying, okay, let's add a margin margin start, yes. So I'm going to say, just type start, and then I have a margin start, and let's say 20 dp. Is that good enough? Let's say 25. Okay, let's just say 30. Okay, that kind of just pushes it up. And then let's make this 30 also. Okay, so I think that's a bit much. Can I make it 20? Yeah, okay, I think that's better. That's better. Okay, so we can now apply the changes we made, and let's see how that actually looks. Let's see how that looks. So okay, so let's move on. Let's move on. Now, what next do we need? What next do we need? So from this design, we need the how was the service? Yeah, what was there below? We need that actually. If you notice, the cost of service is faint. So, and if you see when we ran what we did, you see how was the service? That's not what we want. Okay, so let's make the how was the service a separate text from that other one. So the fact that this shows that it's a hint. So we need this as a separate text. So let's just do that. So I'm going to take out this. I'll just cut it. I think I'll need it later. And then we need a text view. Okay, we need a text view. And then so I'm going to come down here after the end of the edit text element, and then I'm going to open my tag, and I'm going to say text view. Okay, and then I want the width to wrap the content. I also want the height to wrap the content. And I'm going to just paste the text. Yeah, so we have how was the service? Yes, I just cut that from the other place and pasted it. Okay, so another thing we need to do is to constrain it. So I want the top of, let me show you. I want the top of this text view to be at the bottom of this edit text. So I'm going to do that by saying, I'm just going to say top. Yeah, so you have top to bottom off. Okay, so this is why you need IDs. Okay, so I'm just going to call the ID of the cost, and then you can see that brings it down to this below it. Then another thing I also want to do, so in order for me to, now, of course, I should constrain it to the start of the parent. Okay, so let me just show you start of parent. Okay, and then it's constrained. But if you notice, it's still, zoom in a bit. Okay, so if you notice, it's still, this doesn't look good. So another way I can do it, I can actually just apply the same thing I did here, copy this, and then just drop them down here. So they are now even. I guess the only difference is the top margin, but it makes me feel like I'm repeating this code. It was here and I'm actually bringing it here. So what do? I think instead of constraining the start of this text view to the start of the parent, why don't I just constrain it to the cost? So it will now just take the same constraints that the cost has. Okay, so and then this is basically it. So the only thing that we now need to see, okay, well, we'll look into better design, but let's just rush this a bit. Okay, so so for now, okay, let's move on. So what are the next thing we need to do? So the next thing we need to do is to add these options. So this we said is somebody said there are radio buttons, okay? But there are radio buttons for different options. So how can we use radio buttons, okay? Well, we need to, since radio buttons are gotten from, they are actually part of a group called the radio group, okay? So the radio group houses your radio buttons. So I'm just gonna come down here and I'm gonna say radio, and then you have group. Good. So this is just a group. It's going to be like a container for every of your radio buttons. So I want it to let it wrap the contents. Yes, let it wrap the contents, and that'll be what's fine. Now, so another thing in a radio group is what we call orientation. Orientation just talks about how the radio buttons should be arranged. Do you want them to arrange horizontally or vertically? Well, in our case, we want them to be vertical. And then I'm going to also constrain. Let's just say start off. Let's use cost. Can do some modifications later. And then, of course, top to bottom of, we need it to be below the text view, but we have not given the text view an ID. So let's come back here, give it an ID, and let's call it, let's just say service question. Okay, so I'll come back here, and then I'm just going to type service again. I get to see that. So that goes below, and I know you're like, but I'm not seeing anything. Yes, we'll add the rate. So now, because I'm not going to close this element, this radio group this way, because I need this radio group can house, it can house other views in it. So because it can do that, this is how I'm going to do it. I'll do it this way. So doing it like this means that from the indentation, you can actually see that you can put in more views there. So at this point, I'm going to now call, put my radio button. So I'm going to open my tag, then radio button. Of course, I want my radio button to wrap the content, the height and the width, okay? And then I want my radio button to have a text. And the first text we had there was amazing. This was how it, yeah, 20%. Okay, where's my percentage sign? Okay, that's that. Yeah, so this was basically what we had. Like I said, we will do better with the design, but let's just get the point. Okay, so of course I need to give it an ID because I'm going to make use of it. So can I just call it option underscore 20? Or yeah, 20 is fine. Yeah, I think, yeah, so that's okay. So option 20. So that's basically what we need, just that. So I can close this. So because we're not expecting to put any other thing in the radio button, I can just close this out. Okay, so this is a text. You have to extract string resource also. So let me just do that, but I won't be doing that for others just to save our time. So I can just copy these and duplicate them in order not to write it much. Okay, so we need 3. So let this be option, change the ID. So this is I think 18, yeah. Option, sorry. Okay. EIG. Okay. And then the text, of course, should not be amazing. I think the text is good. And then we have 18%. Then I'll close that out. And then for this is option 15. Sorry. Okay, and then this is okay. 15%. Okay, so these are the 3 radio buttons that we had. So that's actually that. So the next thing, we're moving, I'm trying to move as fast as I can. Should we test this out? Let's just run this and see how it looks. I'll just apply that. Okay, so while that is running, so from our design, if you notice from this, you can see that there's this one. It's like this is already selected. So it's actually giving it a default selection. What should the default selection mode be? So how are we going to do that in the design? So this is how we actually do it. Okay, so this is how we actually do it. So just give me. Okay, so I think this should be done. So let's see how this looks. Okay, so yes, this is basically how it looks. Okay, so we need to add a default selection. So let's do that. So it's very simple. In the radio group, we'll just add one element. Okay, let me just add it here. Oh, let's just do that here. Okay, so it's called checked button. Okay, so with this, I can now decide which of these buttons should be checked by default. Well, of course, I want to do 20. Okay, so you can actually see that just checks that button out. Okay, so that's basically that. Okay, so so let's complete the rest of the layout. What do we have left? We have this text view, we have the switch, we have this text, this switch button, and this amount. Okay, so let's do that as quick as possible. Okay, so let's add a switch. Okay, so the switch basically is just going to help us round up the decimal numbers, especially, for some of we have recurring decimals. When you try to do probably 10 divided by 3, okay, that gives us a recurring decimal. Okay, right? Yes, it does. So how do we do that? Of course, we just want to round it up. So that's the essence of that. Okay, so I'm going to add a switch, like Emmanuel rightly said. So this is basically how I'm going to do it. So below the radio group, okay, yes. So I'm just going to come down here and say switch. Okay, good. So of course, now the width, I'm going to use 0dp. Okay, we can't use match parents. Okay, actually, we shouldn't really use match parents for any view in a constraint layout. So instead, we use 0dp, and 0dp just means match constraints. Okay, it's just going to match constraints instead of matching the parent. So for the height, okay, we can now say wrap content. Okay, and I'm going to add some constraints. So I want the end to be the end of the parent. Okay, and then okay, I want the, sorry, what just happened? Okay, and then I want the start. Okay, start to be the start of parents. Okay, let's make it start of parents. And then what else? Let's say then the top, of course, should be the top of the bottom of our radio group, but we have not given our radio group an ID. We want the top of this to be the bottom of the radio group. So let's give the radio group an ID, and I'm going to call it, let's just call it options, or let's say tip options. Okay, so with that, I can now give, okay, tip options. Okay, that's fine. So it goes below it. You can actually see it right here. Okay, let me just close this out, close this tag. Okay, and then, okay, so we have use switch compat from app compat or switch material from the material word library. Okay, so sometimes you're going to get these suggestions, okay, from Android. So yeah, we can actually just follow them and then just think that's fine. It's not really a big idea, but these are just different libraries, and then you get to see different implementations. So you can now see this kind of seems, look at this kind of seems a bit longer. So if I take it back to switch, okay, this seems a bit shorter. So sometimes it just depends on which one you want to use. So let's see how the switch material looks like. Okay, it's still longer actually. So well, whichever one you want to do, you can actually just go ahead with that. So, but let's just stick with switch. Though I wouldn't really like to see all this. So which would I use? Okay, let's use material, kind of like material designs and everything. Okay, so now we want to make it to be checked by default, okay? Just like it is in the design. If you notice, it's already moved to the right. That means it is checked by default. So let's do that. So we do that with the attributes checked, and we set it to true. Okay, you can see that it becomes what's checked. And then we notice the switch had a text here called roundup tip. Okay, roundup tip is kind of like a question. So we can just add that text instead of doing a separate text view. So let's see how that would work. So I'm just going to say text. Let's see how that would work out. And then I'm going to say round, okay, up, T. Yeah. So you can actually just see that. Okay, so that actually just makes it a bit more. Okay, so it's actually glued to the parent. So we can actually solve that by probably by just adding, let's just add a margin start for now and just kind of, let's just say 8 dp. Let's see how that works. Okay, that kind of takes it out there a bit. So let's apply this and just see how much we have covered. Okay, so continuing with that, what next do we have to do? So it's to add the button, okay, the calculate button. So how do we do that? Well, that's pretty much easy. For I think you've used buttons. Below this, I'm going to just call my button. Okay. Now, just like it is, if you actually you just see this here, you notice this guy is a bit wide. So I'm going to just, so we're going to make the width to be what, 0 dp. Let it match the constraints, the width of this button, and then the height should be wrap content. Okay. Let's just see how that's going to be first. And then, we're going to give it a text value to be calculate. Okay. And then let's add some constraints. So, well, our switch doesn't have an ID and we want it to be below that. So let's give it an ID of switch. Okay. And okay, yeah, so you cannot use a resource name cannot be a Java keyword. So switch is actually a keyword, so you can't actually use that. So let's say round, or okay, let's just say tip switch. Okay, so yeah, that's fine. That's fine. So with that, I can constrain top to the bottom of tip switch. Yeah, that brings the button down. And okay, so the start, let's make the start to the start of the parent. And then let's make the end to the end of the parent. Yes, and that kind of just stretches it out for us a bit. Okay, so that's actually, I've added a button. Yeah, I know it's not as styled as we want, but come on, we'll get into that much more later. Someone is asking, how can we change the colors of the radio buttons and the switch, please? Okay, so yes, you can actually. They use your, let me show you. I don't really want to stress much about that. So by default, they use these inbuilt colors. Okay, these are, so you can actually decide to change them yourself using probably a background. Like there's a lot of attributes you can do for that. So you have background tint mode, and the rest. So I think I'll leave you to try that out. So that's not what I really want to do now. I don't want to focus more on that. Okay, so but that's how you can actually do that. Okay, so what is left is I think just the text below that. That's the tip result. Okay, so that's the text view. I'm gonna close this out, and then we'll add a text view. Okay, so our text view with, of course, gonna wrap content. Everything's wrapping the content, and then let's say the constraint. We want the constraint end to the end of parent, and then the top to the bottom of the button, okay, of which we have not. So let's ID. So I want to call this BTN underscore button. Sorry, BTN underscore button. So this young man should go there, should go below it. Okay, good. And then let's give it a text, and the text should be, let's say, tip results. Okay, and then I can just close this out. Okay, so that pretty much just gives us basically everything we need. Let's see, are we leaving out anything? Okay, I don't think we are leaving out anything. So it's basically making everything look as it should be, of which, well, that's pretty much easy to do. Okay, so please, if you have a question, of course, you can just raise your hand and then I'll get to help you with that. Okay, so let me run this and then see how it looks like. So of course, while that is working, for the sake of, let's just extract, Alt Enter, extract all string resources. Okay, let's just do all that and let's follow best practices. Okay, which other one do we have? Okay, we have this. Okay, then we have this. Extract string resource. And okay, so we have two more. So I can just click on this and it takes me. So for the autofill, I don't want to do autofill now. So let's just obey. So what can we do? So what's basically the autofill? It's just the same thing as your hint. So let's just see what that does. I'm going to just do test, and then we'll see what that does. Okay, okay, so that's to take out everything, but some certain things are not really compulsory. So let me just run this, and then we get to see that. Okay, so while that's running, okay, so we have to reinstall and then restart the application. Okay, so what do we have? Okay, so yeah, so this is basically what we have. Okay, but it's not as styled as it should be. So I'm gonna leave that up to you guys to style it. I'll drop the picture for you, and then you're gonna style it the way it should be. I think that's pretty much something you can actually handle yourself. Pretty much something you can handle yourself. Okay, so I want us to actually do a little bit of logic. Okay, but first things first, when you're done, it's always good to reformat your XML, okay? Reformat your code in case you, so you can just do, like I said, your activity main.xml, just go to code and then go to click on reformat code, and then it helps you arrange them based on best practices. Okay, so you don't have to do that manually yourself. You can let Android Studio do that for you. Well, try as much as possible to take away unnecessary spaces, okay, and make your code look as neat as possible. Okay, so I'm actually going to drop a practice assignment for you guys. You would style this yourself, okay, based on the picture. You're going to rearrange this, and then you build your own application, but it's going to be a different calculator thing you're going to calculate, but that's going to be up to you. It's just going to be a design. Okay, this particular assignment is going to be a design. You're not going to write any actual code for that. Okay, so actual code will be, I think that will be by next week. Yes, hopefully. So that's that. So, but let's write a bit of code. Let's see if we can just start out something and then probably finish it. So, how can we calculate the tip? A tip. How can we actually do that? Okay. So we already have a list of radio buttons, okay, with their figures, 20%, 18%, 15%. So how can we calculate that, okay? So before we move, let me just do a rundown. Just like I said, there are some things I don't explain because of I'm leaving it based on how we progress. Okay, so let's look at that. Now, of course, this is actually called the app project structure. Okay, so this is basically where your projects, your files are being arranged. Here you find your classes. Okay, here you find your resources and everything you need. Okay, so the values, you have colors, you have your strings, and then here you have themes. This is where you actually work on your night mode and everything. So we'll get to actually implement dark mode rather in the course of this class. Now, so one thing we have not talked about is this young man here, this Gradle script folder. Someone has actually talked about Gradle and everything. So basically, Gradle is actually it's actually an automated build system that Android Studio uses. Okay, whenever you change your code, you add a resource or make changes to your app, your Gradle actually just figures out what's change you've made and takes the necessary step to rebuild your application. It actually even installs your app on your emulator or your physical device. It controls execution. That is actually the work of the Gradle. Okay, so that's why sometimes when you see it slowing up, okay, of course it needs good CPU power. Okay, so sometimes it takes time because of what it's doing. It's building this stuff for you to be able to see what you have actually done. Okay, so there are other files inside here. You have build.gradle, we have the project. This is the project level, and then we have the module level, which is the app level. Okay, we'll get to talk about more of these things but these are the two main ones we will be making use of. But other things, like say, as time goes on, we'll talk about them. I introduce things based on when it is needed. So the next thing we're going to look into, do we have any question? If anyone has a question, just raise your hand before I move into the next thing we're going to be talking about today. Anybody with a question? Okay, so in the absence of none, so let's look at something else. We're going to look at what we call view binding. Okay, we're going to look at view binding. Okay, so in order to actually calculate the tip, we'll need access to our UI elements. Okay, what are UI elements? UI elements, the edit text, the radio buttons. We need access to the switch. We need access to this button. We need access to this result. Okay, so we need access to our UI elements to be able to read input from the user. Okay, now we have, if you recall, we've actually been doing a lot of things. Let me just come down to the class. Okay, so we have seen a lot of, we've done a lot of, find view by ID. We've done this, okay, and what does this basically do? It's used to reference a view, okay, by its ID. So when we have a reference to a view, we can access the attributes of that view. That's why we have the find view by ID method. Okay, so it does exactly what you need. Okay, as far as you have the ID of that view. Now, but this approach is actually cool. But let me show you one of the issues. If you have more views, if you have up to 30 views, that means you're going to have 30 find view by IDs. Okay, so let me just actually show you what I mean. Assuming I have, let's say, val text equal text of type text view, okay, and I want to say find view by ID, and I want to get the ID of that text. Say r.id. Let me just use anything. Let me just use something. Okay. Okay, find view. Okay, so now this is to access one view. So imagine in our application we have up to 20 views, 20 text views, 10 buttons, 5 radio buttons, 10 images. I think I've called probably like 40 something views now. We'll have a lot of find view by IDs. Now look at how this already is not even pretty in the eyes. This already is not pretty in the eyes, but this is basically what you're going to have. You have to be calling there's going to be a lot of call to those views. Okay, so this is what view binding solves. This is the problem it solves. And what does view binding actually do? View binding it takes the IDs of every view and stores it in a binding object. So just like we talked about classes and objects, so with one object, you can access every ID of every view. Okay, so it just makes it much easier to call methods on your views. That's basically what it does. And we'll see how to implement that. So first things first, we need to enable view binding. We need to actually enable that feature. So I'll go to my build.gradle, the module level, which is the app level, and just below this, if you look at this scope, this starts at this Android. So in the Android section, okay, so just below the last one, which is this Kotlin options, depends on what you have. I'm going to just do this, say build features. And then I'm going to say view binding equals true. Okay, so this is basically it. Now, of course, the access, okay, say access to view binding exceeds is access right. So I think you can actually just keep that. You may not see that issue for your own end, but I'm actually upgraded my Android Studio, so there's a lot of things that may have to listen. So let's just, okay, so probably, so you just build your Gradle and it gets to download the necessary dependencies and everything. So this is how view binding works. Okay, this is how view binding actually works. So like I said, with find view by ID, you actually have to make one call for each view. But with view binding, it gives you one binding object that has reference for all views that has an ID. As far as that view has an ID, it is stored in that one binding object. So how do we get that? How do we start using that? So I'm going to come in my main activity class, not in the onCreate method, in the class, and I'm going to declare a variable, a late init variable. I'll explain what that does. I'm going to call it binding. And because I have actually brought in view binding in my build.gradle file, you can actually see I have binding of type activity main binding. Okay, so of course our activity is called main activity. So this is a naming convention. It reverses it. It says activity main binding. So I'm going to just click on that. Okay, so what does this late init means? I know some of you are like, oh, what actually is this? Okay, so the late init keyword, it's just you promising that your code will initialize the variable before it uses it. So late init means late initialize. I remember when you declare a variable, you should initialize it. It means when you create a variable, you should put a value in it. You should store a value in it. So, but when you use late init variable, you're promising that, look, before I use this variable, I'm going to initialize it. I'll give it a value, but not now. Just create that variable and wait for me to make use of it. Okay. So the next thing I'll now do is to now initialize that in my onCreate function. Okay. So I'm going to say binding equals, and then I'm going to call activity main binding. You can see it here already. I'm going to use the second one. I'll explain, and then inflator, and I'm going to pass in what we call layout inflator. Okay, so I know a lot of things have just happened here, right? I get. Okay, so basically what I've just done is just we have initialized the binding object, so it's going to have access to the views in the activity main .xml. It's just going to have access to the view. So this is just the convention. This is how to initialize your binding variable. Another thing we'll now need to change is this guy. Okay, I'm not going to say binding dot. I'm going to just take out this young man. Let's just cut it. And then let me put it down here. So we're not going to actually now set content. We're not going to say activity main anymore. Okay, what we now want to get is I'm now going to say binding dot root. So the root is use a method called getRoot. And what's your root? Your root is actually your parent layout of that XML file, of which if you look here, you can see is constraint layout. That's our root. If I double click on this and do Control B, it takes me to my layout, and you can see it takes me to the parent. So that is the root. So we are binding. So the fact that we have bounded the root, we have access to every ID in that root, in that constraint layout, in that container. Okay. So please, if you have questions, just raise your hand and I'll answer. Okay, I hope I'm not too fast. Okay, so now when you actually need a reference to the view, okay, you can actually just get it, using the binding object, which is this young man here. You can actually just use it using the binding object. We don't need to use find view by ID anymore. So let me show you the difference. The old way, I'm going to use comments now. Old way that we are getting access to views, we would say val let's say calculate can I just say calc button, that's calculate button, and it's going to be of type button. Okay, and then I'm now going to say find view by ID. Okay, sorry, find view by ID, and then r.id, and that our view is think. Okay, so yes, so this is how we would have actually done it, and then we'll call our button. Let's say button. Did we give? Let's find out. Okay, btn button. That's the name. Okay, so yeah, btn button. Okay, so this was how we would do it the old way, and then if we want to change the text of that button, we would say calc button dot, and then we'll call the text property, which has a get text and set text. Depends on which one you want to do. So we want to set text, and then I'll say new button. Okay, so this is how I've actually done it. So let me apply this. Okay, so we shouldn't see calculate here. When we run this application, we shouldn't see calculate. We should actually see new button, because we have changed the text from this code, from this line 20, we have actually changed the text. Okay, so while that is running, that's the old way. Now, but using view binding, so let's reinstall and restart. So using view binding, okay, let's see, probably that comes up soon. Yes. Okay, so now you see the text changes to new button. So of course, the old way works fine. But using view binding, okay, I would say val, let's say, okay, so let's just, let me make this a bit more faster. I'm gonna copy, paste this, and then I'm gonna comment this out. Okay, so here I won't say find view by ID anymore. I'll use my binding object, binding dot, and then you see I have access to every ID, every of them, every of the IDs. So I choose the one I want, which is btn button, and then that's that. So running this, it should also change to new button, or probably, yeah, it should change to new button. Okay, so let me add S, so be sure that it actually works. New buttons, yeah, new buttons. Okay, so that's view binding. Okay, so this is actually view binding, but the best way, this is the best way to use view binding. Best way with view binding without a variable. Remember, we talked about, I said before, try to limit the number of variables what you create, because they occupy space in memory. So I can just say binding, call my binding object, and access the particular view I want, which is the button. And then with that, I can now perform whatever operation I have. So I have binding.button.text, and then I just change it to buttons. So with this, sorry, this should be in a string. Yeah. And this is the best way. So you don't have to, we are no longer creating a variable. So you just access the ID and then you go straight to implementing your changes that you want to implement. And that is it, changes it to buttons. Okay, so that's actually what view binding. It actually just makes things easier. It makes things a whole lot easier. Okay, so let's now calculate a tip. Okay, I think let's calculate. How can we actually calculate what the tip? Okay, when the user taps on the button, how can you calculate what the tip? So I'm actually going to just take this out. We don't. This was just to explain the view binding. So we want to, when the user clicks on this button, we want to calculate the tip that will be given to probably the waiter or the waitress. So that means we need to put and set an on-click listener on the button. So using the best way, I'm going to say binding dot calculate btn, right? btn button dot set on-click listener. And that is it. So what do we want to do when this on-click listener is that we want to calculate the tip. So I want to create a function, okay, that will be called when the button is clicked, and that function is going to calculate the tip. Okay, so but the function has not been created. This function does not exist yet. So I'll allow Android Studio to create it for me. So I'll just click on create function and it does that for me. So how are we going to calculate the tip? So first things first, we need to actually get the cost of the service. That's the first thing. Okay, from here, you need to get whatever the user will type as the cost, whatever the cost of the service is, we need to get that value. So that's the first thing we're going to be doing. How can we get that value to get the cost of the tip? Okay, so now the text, whatever this text is going to be stored in the edit text. Remember, we're using an editable text view. So whatever the user is going to type is going to be stored in the edit text, but we need it as a number. Okay, we need it as a number because this is a text, which is characters, right? But we need it as a number, so we can use it in calculations. Okay, so remember, just like when we wrote some of our codes, like for example, the integer type, okay, it can only hold integer numbers. So to use decimal, okay, we have to use another data type, which is double instead of integer. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to get the text and then we'll convert it to a double. We'll get the text and then convert it to a double. How do we do that? Okay, simple. We'll come down here and then I'm going to create a variable where I'm going to store the input. So let me just say, but let me call this cost. Let me call it cost. Okay. It's going to be okay. So let me show you two ways of doing this thing. Okay. Let me just say edit text. Okay, and this edit text is going to be of type what? So I'm going to store by, let's say, binding dot our cost of service. Where is it? Which is the cost here, which is the edit text. Okay, dot text. Okay, so remember I told you we have get text and set text. So when you actually when you assign, you're setting the text, but when you want to get, you just use dot text. When you leave it like this, it's going to get whatever the user imputes into it. So now we have gotten the text that the user is going to type in, and we have stored it in this variable. So what next thing we want to do is I'm going to create a cost variable, and I'm going to now convert the edit text to double. So I'm going to say edit text dot to double. Okay, let's see. So so if you notice, we cannot get to double. Okay, we can't actually get to double, and this is the reason. Okay, now what you're actually getting, okay, is it's in fact you can't actually convert. You need to convert a string to a double, but it actually turns out that this dot text here attribute of an edit text is not a string, it's called an editable. Okay, if you can look here, you see Android.widget here, public to editable. So it returns an editable text. It does not return a string. So, but what we need is actually what? A string. So we can actually what? Convert it. So how do we, what I'm going to do is, I'm going to get the text and then I'm going to say dot to string. So since I have converted to string now, I can now convert to the cost to a double. So this is basically, so the first line, what we are doing here is to get the input, whatever the user is going to type, and convert it to a string. And then we created a cost variable to convert that string to a number, a decimal, because that is what we need to make our calculations, okay? But if you look at this, this is kind of, we're just wasting space. We're just creating a lot of variables here. So I can just, instead of this, I can just change this to cost. And then all I'll say is binding.cost. Change it to a string and then to a double. And this is that. Just makes it, it's done in one line instead of having to create two variables. Okay, so I hope we are, so that's the first thing, to get the text. Now, the next thing we need to do is to get the percentage. That's the next thing we need to do. How can we get this percentage from these radio buttons? Okay, so this is how, I hope I'm not too fast. If I am, you can actually just draw me back and get to explain stuff. Okay, so the next thing is to get the tip port percentage. Okay, so well, we're going to get it from the radio group. It's going to be gotten from the radio group because the radio buttons are inside. We're going to get it from the radio group. So this is what we'll do first. In our calculate tip function, I'm going to create a variable to know which of the IDs is selected. So I'm going to say I'm going to create a variable called selected ID, and then it's going to be equal to I'm going to say binding dot options dot, our options, which is the radio group, yes, dot there's a property called checked radio button ID. So this variable is going to now get, what it's basically going to do is it's going to come down, okay, and find out which of these buttons is checked. Remember, we created a default of the check button is 20 by default. So that is going to get the ID of whichever button is checked and store it in that variable. Okay, so that's basically what that line is going to do. So now that we know which, from this variable, we now know which button is checked. Okay. The next thing we're going to do is to what we need a percentage actually, because we are working in percent. We're using percentage. So we could actually do a lot of if-else statements, but we're going to use a when since we have done that. So I'm going to write this. I'm going to create a variable and say tip percentage. And this is basically what it's going to do. So when, I'm going to say when what? When the selected ID, that's whatever ID has been selected, when it is that, so if that ID is, we'll now say r.id, we want to get the first option. The first option is, I think, 20, option 20. If it is option 20, I want it to be 0.20. Now remember, we're dealing with percent and we had 20. Okay, so we had 20. So percentage is actually 20 over 100, which is what? 0.2. So I'm going to do the same thing for the rest. I'm just going to do Control D is going to duplicate that. So this is going to be for option, I think we have 18. Yes, option 18. So the percentage, 18% is actually 0.18. So, well, remember, we have only 3 options. So the next one should just be an else instead. So I'm going to say else So else what we have is the 15, option 15. So that's going to be 0.15. So we're just basically what's getting the percentage and storing it also. So that gets the tip what percentage. Okay. So now let's now calculate the tip and round it up. This is just going to be very easy. So how can we calculate the tip? Okay, how can we calculate the tip? So basically what we'll just do. So the tip, I'm going to create a variable var tip. Okay, how can we calculate the tip? It's just going to be our tip percentage multiplied by our cost. That is it. The percentage multiplied by the cost gives you the tip, which is going to be stored in this variable. Okay. So if you notice, we use the var instead of a val. So because you may need to round up, the value if the user selected that option. So that means the value might actually change. So so we need to now actually check for the roundup, okay, to know if a user actually clicked on this switch statement. So how do we do that? Yes, I'm going to create a variable also. Someone will like, we're creating a lot of variables. So val roundup. So I'm going to access a binding dot, what do we call it? Call it tip switch, yes, dot is checked. So this is a method to see if if that switch has been clicked, if it is checked. Okay, so it will return true or false. Okay, it will return what's true or what false. Now, but we need to format it, okay? Because we remember we're using a kind of Naira and Kobo thing. So we're going to have decimal. So we need to actually format it very, very well so it can be displayed properly. Okay, so this is going to bring me to introduce a certain function, a method actually that will help us do that. And it's actually called is a number format. Okay, so this is basically how I'm going to do it. How will I format the tip? I'm going to create a variable, let's say formatted tip. Okay, and I'm going to now call this this is a number format. Okay, number format. Okay, dot get currency instance. Okay, number format dot get currency instance dot format. And then what do you want to format? I want to format the tip. Yes, so we can now find, so the formatted tip now is going to be stored in this formatted tip variable, okay? Now, the next thing we're going to do, almost done, is to display the tip. Okay, we need to display our tip at this point where we have the tip amount. We want to display it after calculation. So what we're going to do is we want to actually put it in a format. We want it to display nicely. Okay, we could actually just assign it to the text variable by doing .text and then we'll say formatted tip, but we want it to be nice with a label. Okay, so so like where you have $sign and then maybe 15 point something and you have dollar or probably Naira and the rest. So how do we do that? Well, I'm actually going to go to my strings.xml. I need to create something. So I'm going to create a new string variable. I'm going to say string. So the name will be tip underscore, let's say amount. Okay. And then what will our tip be? I'm going to close this. And then I'm going to say tip amount. Okay. And then colon. And then I'm going to add something, %s. Okay, so where this our %s is where our formatted currency will be inserted. It's like a placeholder. Okay, it's like a placeholder. That's good. So what we'll have, what will be displayed is tip amount, and then this %s is a placeholder, and what will be stored there is what will be displayed there rather, or inserted is going to be the formatted currency. Okay, so how can we do that? So how do we now make use of this? We want it to display like this, tip amount and then the formatted currency will not be here. So this is how I'll do it. I'm just now going to go to my function, and then I'm going to, so we can actually just do that here. Let's just do that here. I'm now going to say binding dot. Now, what's the ID for this view? Okay, well, I'm not giving it an ID, so we need to give it an ID. Okay, so let me give it an ID of, let's say, tip or tip results. Yeah, okay, good. So I'm going to say binding.tip results, good, which is that text view, dot text. So I want to give it a text. Okay, so what will be the text? So we want to get this string. We want to get this string that we have created here. So we're going to use a method called getString. Of course, and the getString takes what? An ID. So just click enter. So what is the ID? Our ID is in the resource folder. And inside the resource folder, we have the strings folder, which is the class arrow.string, and then dot, we created a string with the name tip amount. So that is that. So, but after that, we need to put in something. It requires, remember we put %s. Now you can look here, it says variable format what args. So if you have any formatted argument of which we created one, we created a placeholder here. So we can now add that to the code. So what do we want to add? It is our formatted tip. Okay, sorry about that. So string that amount and then formatted. Okay, so yes, we can actually see it. And the reason we can't see it is because this formatted tip is in a separate function. This is a function, this is a function. So you can't actually access it here. So what I'm just going to do, I'm going to bring this young man. Just going to cut this guy. And then let's put it here. It can actually come here. And then so with that, I should be able to get access to the formatted tip. Okay, I still don't, right? We're still in the, okay. Okay, let's see. I hope I haven't made a mistake. Okay, so get tip result and then get string the text. Okay, formatted tip. Okay, so let's do this. Okay, let me be sure that I can see it. Okay, so let's try that again. So after we put the tip amounts, we need to be sure that we created this right. Okay, yes, okay, good. Okay, yeah, it actually sees that, so. Okay, yeah, I can actually see it now. Okay, good, that's fine. Okay, so let's move on. So the next thing we need to do, okay, so what we can now do is this. We need to now check. So we did something to check if this young man has been checked. Okay, so can I just move this down here? Let me just move this down here. I think we'll do a little bit of arrangements later. Okay, so after that, now, so if the roundup is checked, we need to know because it's either checked or not checked. So we need to check what the value is. So if roundup, okay, so what this variable is now, it's a Boolean, either true or false, okay, based on if the button is checked. So if it is true, what do we want to do? I want my tip. I want to round up my tip if it is true. If you check that switch, I want to round up my tip. So how do I actually do that? Okay, so I'm going to use a library or class rather than it's called. I'm going to say Kotlin.math.seal. Okay, so this actually does the rounding up, and then I'm going to pass in tip. Yeah, I think that's yes. So that actually rounds it up for us. Okay, so Okay, yes. I think we're good. So let me just, so I think based on the logic, after rounding up, I think that's when we should now format it. So I'm going to take this guy out. Let it be below this guy here. So yes, good. If it's true formatted, then now, okay. So it's fine. It can actually just stay here. Okay, so what next? What next can we actually do? So, so yeah, one last thing, we need to remove this text, this guy. Let's remove this guy, since we're actually now setting the text in the code. So let's take this guy out of here. So and then we'll add, I think I introduced us to this, use the tools.text. Okay, so this is just going to display only in the design, but when you run the application, you won't get to see it. So let's see. So let's just use that. Okay, so let me run this now, and let's see let's see if it works. Let's see if it actually works. Okay, so I think we're rounding up this class actually. So okay, so reinstall and restart. Okay, so let's see. Okay, good. So now, so let's give the cost. So remember, we actually formatted it to show just numbers. So let's see. Let me say 52. And then remember, there's nothing showing here. So, and this is checked. And this one is also checked. So 52 is the cost. We are giving them, and we're saying, okay, fine, the service was amazing. So we're giving them 20% of that. And we want to round it up. So when I click on calculate, we can see the tip amount here, $11. So let me increase the size. So we get to the size. Let's make it a 20 SP. Okay, that's fine. 20, sorry, it should be SP and not PKP. Okay, I think that's fine. We can actually let's just, for it to show very well, let's just say, let's give it a text color black. Okay, good. So let's apply these changes and then see how that runs out. Okay, so okay, so 52, and then let's click on the calculate, and then you can see the tip amount is 11. So if I choose good and calculate, it's 10. If I choose 15 and calculate, it is 8. So it's rounding it up. So let's go back to 20. It's 11. So let's turn off this. So we don't want to round it up. What do we have? We have 10.40. When it's good, we have 9.36. And when it is okay, which is 15%, we have 7.80. So it actually works. Okay, it works. But let's see what happens. Let's try something. I want to crash this app on purpose. I want to actually crash this app on purpose. And so we can actually learn a bit of what's called debugging. Now, see, one of the things you need to learn to do when you're building applications, think of your users as crazy. Because people that will test your app, just think of them that, look, what are the craziest things they can actually do on this application? What are the craziest actions they can actually do on this application? Of course, we're actually seeing that after calculating, we're still having the text here. But that shouldn't happen. The text should leave. But let me delete this and then try to calculate. You can see the app crashes. Okay, so let's actually know why does this app crash? Like, what's the reason? So I'm going to open up my logcat. So this is where you get to debug your applications. And then let's run it again and see why that happens. So tips is the name. Okay, tips is the name. So let's, I'm gonna just push this here. Hold on, let me clear this. So we'll have a clean video. Okay, so when I click on calculate, it crashes. So let's look at this crash. This is the beginning of the crash. So you need to learn debugging, okay? So when you look at this, it shows you the time, the process, and a lot of things. So look at this line here, say java.lang.number format exception, empty string, okay? So what does that really mean? So first of all, the empty string, okay, if you actually, so it actually has what we call an exception. Now, basically, what is actually an exception? Okay, what is an exception? It's just a way of the systems telling you that there's a problem. Okay, that something is actually wrong. Okay, so in this case, what is wrong here? Now, we based on what the code we what we wrote, we are actually converting a text. Okay, we are converting a text to a to a double. Okay, you can actually see that here. So another thing, let me go back to the let's go back to the code. Let me try this again and then let it crash. Okay, so good. Now, so this helps you to, in your code, in your logcat, it even shows you where the problem is. Now you can look at this at com.example.tips calculate tip method in line 25. So when you click on this, it takes you to line 25 and it tells you, look, that's where the problem is. Okay, now what is actually happening here? What are we even saying here? We are actually we're getting the text, converting it to a string, and then converting it to a double. But what we did, we just clicked on calculate. No text has actually come in. We have not actually put in any text. So it cannot even convert anything because you have not given it anything. That is why it crashes. So how can we solve this? So this actually brings us to talking about the null concept, N-U-L-L, null. Okay, now because the reason the application crashes is because it doesn't know what to do with an empty string. That's why you see it's telling you empty string. It's expecting a string, but it's empty. It's an empty string. It doesn't know what to do with it. Okay, so this brings us to to null. What is null? Okay, now null means no value. It's actually a special value that actually means no value rather. Okay, it's different from double. The default value of a double is 0.0. The default value of a string is probably just an empty string. Okay, now but a double, okay, it actually means there is no value, no string, no double, no integer, no nothing. It is no value. Now, so when we called this to double, when we called this conversion on a string that is actually empty, or a string that does not represent any valid decimal number, it won't work. Okay, so and that's why it actually crashes the app. But in Kotlin, there's a method, okay, that handles this problem. So what it actually does is that it will return a decimal number if it can, okay, or it will return a null if there's that problem. So that method is actually called to double. You can see you have to double or null. So this actually solves that problem. Okay, so remember, like I said, null means no value. Now the reason is because many methods, they expect a value, so they don't know how to handle null and they'll just stop. That's why they crash. Okay, so it's just like you're very hungry and yes, I know you're hungry, and I tell you, you call me on the phone. Hey, I'm actually, oh man, hungry. I'm really, really hungry. I need food. And I tell you I'm coming. And then I show up with no food. Like you don't know what to do, like, because you're expecting probably me to come with food or I have to give you money to get food. But I just come and I don't have anything, man. At that point, look, trust me, so let's not really go there. There's a lot of things human beings will do, but this Android system, the compiler doesn't know what to do with that. Okay, so that is why it's just crash. So Kotlin tries to limit situations where null is actually being used. It tries to limit that situation. So it's always good to do a null check. We call it a null check. So how can we actually do that check? Because even right now, as we have done double or null, we are basically just saying that, look, it's possible for you to get a null value. That's basically what we are saying, that it's possible for you to get a null value. So what do we now do? We'll now do a test. So I'm just going to say if cost equals null. So if you actually get a null value, just return. Okay. Now, of course, it's telling you can replace if with an Elvis operator. I'll show you that. But this basically what we want to check if what we are getting is a null. Okay. So this line, okay, basically just actually says, okay, fine, just return from this method. Okay, don't just leave. If the cost is a null, okay, just return. So the return instruction is to just exit this method. It will exit the method without executing the rest of the instructions. So it will leave this calculate tip method if it gets a null. It will not run or execute these instructions. That's what this code does actually. So if the method needed to return a value, we'll definitely, if this method was to return a value here, we'll now specify the return instruction within this. So let's now test it. Let's run this application and then test it, okay? Let's see. So we're basically going to just do some debug. So let's see. So I'm just going to click on calculate and you see it does not crash. It doesn't crash anymore. Okay, so that solves that. Okay, so for this, sometimes, like I said, Kotlin is Android Studio actually is a bit, one of the things you have in IntelliSense suggestions. So it can tell you, look, instead of actually writing this long code, you can use what we call an Elvis operator. So when I click on this, this is basically an Elvis operator. You have your question mark and then colon and then return. So it's basically just saying, look, if this is going to be a null, man, just return. Like if this is just not going to work, just return. So this is actually a shorter way of doing that. So let's do this. I'm going to just put the 2. I'm going to just comment this out. So it's either you use that or you say, do this, return. Okay, so that's that. Now, so that's actually solved that. So let's handle another case. Okay, there's another thing here that a user can actually do. So let's put a valid amount, let's say 23. So when I calculate, you see it actually gives this. Okay, but when I delete this cost and click on calculate, this guy should not still show. Okay, we shouldn't, the first time that you calculated, it displays the result, but the second time, it shouldn't display this. It's still showing the previous calculation when there's nothing here. So that means we need to take these out. So that's another thing we need to do. So how do we do that? It's very simple. I'm just going to say, so let me come back to this young man. And then I can take this out. Or let me now comment this out. Oh, sorry. Just take this out. So now we want to do something like, look, if the cost is null, okay, I want to change, I want that text to disappear. So what is the text? The text is actually tip results, that text view. So dot text, I want to change the text. And what do I want it to be? I want it to be an empty string. An empty word string. So there's not going to be anything written there. I'm not going to give it any string. I just want it to be empty. So let's apply that and see if that would work. So basically, this is supposed to clear the tip amount before returning, before returning from that function. So let's try that. Give it a value, then calculate. We have $9. So when I take out this, it takes it out. So that's actually that. So basically what we can now do, we're actually done. We've actually built the application. So, but it's necessary to adopt good coding practices. So we're rounding up it's necessary to adopt good coding practices. First things first. Now, the Android Studio actually knows what may change and what may not. Okay, so if you look at this, it's telling you, well, this variable you're not going to modify. There's no way about modifying it, so you can change it to a var. So we can just, do that, and then follow some certain suggestions. At any point, if you change it, you can also come back to, make that. So another thing you can actually do that makes it a bit more easier is to inspect your code. We want to make sure we have a green here, remove warnings and the rest. So you can actually inspect your code. So how do you do that? You just see on this, your main activity, just click on Analyze and come down to Inspect Code. So you can inspect the whole project, the module, or just this particular Word file. So for now, we want just this main activity. That's the only thing we want to inspect. Okay, and then I'll just apply that. So it's going to run, and then you get to now see some of the warnings. So first things first, let's open this. You can now see unused import directives. Okay, so we have an unused import in our main activity, of which when you click on that, it shows you. So this grayed out line, we don't need it. So I can just click on optimize imports. Okay. And then it takes that out for me. So that solves that problem. So another issue we have, style. Okay, so now the first thing first, style issue, this first one in our main activity, it says property binding could be private. So class member can have private visibility. So when I click here, it says this, you can actually make this private. It's not going to, we don't need to use it outside. So I'll just click on make binding private. That solves one of them. And then we have variable declaration could be moved inside the when. Where is this variable declaration? When I click here, you see this selected ID. So it's telling us that, look, I can actually move this and make it an inline variable. I can move it into this when function. Instead of having to create a variable that is going to store this, why don't I just move this whole value inside? So I'm going to click on the inline, and what happens? So let me show you for that, in case that was very fast. I'll do this. So remember, our selected ID is a variable that takes the value of the checked button to see if that option was checked. So we don't want this. We don't want to create a variable. So I'm just going to take this binding.tip options. So .checked button ID. So whatever button ID it is, I just want the value to be here. So with this, I don't need to create this variable anymore. So that is actually that. So with this, we have a green mark here, no problems found. So I think that actually means we are actually good to go. Okay. So another thing, we can just remove some unnecessary variables. One of them, let's look at is the roundup. Okay. Now look at, we created a variable here, Roundup, and it's storing the result of if the switch is being checked. So instead of that, just like we did for that when statement, let's take this and drop it in here, and then we can delete this off. So by removing unused, like variables that are not really that's much important. We've done for the tip percentage, we've done for that. So so let's see what other variable so can we do. So that's that. So another thing, let's see, we're looking at code standards. We need to try to delete some just remove some repetitive codes. Let's see, what can we do here? So we can actually just update our calculate tip function. Let it have a display tip function. There's what we call a helper function. Okay, so like this if cost equals null, okay, or you understand. So another thing we can do is, there are two things. Your cost can be equal to null or 0. Of course, we don't want to have to start calculating for 0. So assuming we have something like this, if cost equals null, or that is the operator for or cost equals 0.0. In case somebody puts a 0.0, so it shouldn't calculate. Of course, the result will be 0. So so if the cost is actually this, it will actually just exit this function. But I want to have a function for displaying the tip. So these guys, let me put this guy in a function. So I want to create a helper function, okay, called display, let's say fun. So let's make it's going to be a private. Okay, sorry, I shouldn't create that inside this function. I have to create a function outside of a function. So private fun, and then let me say display. So to display the tip. Okay. So what are we going to display? A tip, and the tip is going to be of type double, because that's the data type I'm making use of. So double. Of course, we have talked about creating functions before, so this shouldn't be new. Okay, so I'm now going to move these guys, because this actually displays the tip. Move these guys into this. So basically, what will I now do? I can now say so instead of having to do this line, I'll just call my display tip, and then so if the cost is actually null or 0, okay, if it's null or 0.0, just display 0.0. That's the tip we want you to display. So if it's that, just display this and then return. So this is just more of making it optimal. What else can we do? So where we have okay. So where do we have as this? Okay, so if this is this, so these are tip now. Okay, so where do we now do this? So instead of having, so if it is checked, what do we want to round up? Okay, tip. So after this whole thing, we'll now call our display tip, and that will pass in tip. Okay, so if at this point, if it is 0, it will display this and leave this function. But if it is not, if there's an actual double data type, actual number, it will go ahead and calculate the percentage, calculate the tip, check if it is, format it, and then displays the tip. Okay. So that is basically that, and then I think that's basically that. So let's just test this and make sure everything is working as it should be. Okay, and then okay, that's fine, that's good. So let's see. Okay, so first things first, if someone puts 0.0, it displays 0.0. If the person doesn't put anything to display 0.0, that's fine. So when you now actually put 21, it gives you the format they are, and then if you disable this, so I think everything works fine. Everything is working fine. Okay, that's fine. So that's actually basically that's that. So that's how to create. Actually just created that. So this is, I think this is the end of the class. On Tuesday, okay, yeah, on Tuesday, we're going to look into something more, having to design your app to look much more better. We're going to actually be looking at that on Tuesday. On Tuesday. We'll look at, we'll talk about themes and just more of polishing your application. So we'll really look at design, how to actually make your designs look cool and following the standard. So that class is going to be on Tuesday. We'll finish it as quick as possible. The truth is, I want to even try, if I can try to actually give you guys stuff to study. So I'm going to drop some resources on the resource channel for Android, so you can actually look at it, and then that will just help you also. So that is that. Do you have any question? Any question, you can just raise your hand and then round up. Okay, so that means there are no questions. I'm really loving this. I'm loving you guys. You guys are really following. So that's good. So I'm going to give you guys an assignment, of course, a task to do. I'm going to drop it on the. I'm going to drop it. Someone was like, "Wow, this is really stage 2." Okay, yes, this is actually stage 2. So we're actually going to be we are building applications. Right now is applications upon applications upon applications. So we build a lot of apps by God's grace. So I'm going to give you a task. So you just check the task channel. Now you're in stage 2. So every task I'm going to drop it on the stage 2 channel. And I'm going to pin it. So check pinned messages. Okay. I'm going to pin it. So check pinned messages for your task for the week. And every Thursday task is good. There's a deadline. Please, let's try as much as possible to meet the deadline. The deadline is actually on Saturday, 11:59 p.m. on Saturday. So make sure to do that so we can grade people on time. I want to show people their results. Okay, so you get to see how you fared. Okay, 75% is the benchmark for promotions or for actually passing a task, 75%. So I want to be able to show people their scores. So it means I need to finish upgrading and know that the deadline is done so that the next day, which is Sunday, you can actually see your scores. Okay, so I'll try as much as possible to also add a marking scheme for you guys. So you get to see what place is going to attract more marks, some of the things that will be looked out for and the marks. And of course, the standard already early submission is 10 marks. So that is just for your notice. Okay, so in the absence of none, I think I can call it a night. Yes. So if you have any questions that you can ask here, just reach me, just ask on the Arts and Mentors channel, can tag my name there, and then I'll reach out to you. So look out for your assignments to be dropping as soon as possible. Okay, so a hand is raised. Okay, Emmanuel Opala, yes, go ahead. Hello, Emmanuel. Hello, Emmanuel, unmute your mic, please. Okay, when is early submission deadline? Okay, anything that is not on the, how do I put it? Okay, yeah, that's a very good question. Yes, when you submit before the deadline, that's early submission. Yes, I think that, let me just put it that way. When you submit before 11:59 p.m., that is early submission. Okay, so there may be times when I might accept submissions past 11:59, but that means you've gotten 0. You have lost 10 marks. Yes, that means you've lost 10 marks. So early submission for me, for the Android track, is going to be before the submission deadline. Okay, so I think that's all. Okay, so thank you guys. And of course, this video is going to be available on YouTube for if you need to peruse through it once more. So thank you very much. And the absence of no questions, this is me saying good night. So Emmanuel, my namesake, please try to get the phone numbers and forward it to me. Okay. Not the people that attended this class, the other class. I hope you got that.
Yes.
Okay, so, okay, thank you very much, everyone, and have a wonderful night.
Good night.